Chartmetric is proud to sponsor the upcoming season of And the Writer Is. As the go-to source for up-to-date global social, streaming, and audience data for artists and music industry professionals, Chartmetric strives to ensure everyone can have a successful career in music. Their easy-to-understand and powerful analytics on over 10 million artists and 100 million tracks will help answer all of your questions, from tracking your stats to discovering new talents. Throughout this season, we'll be showcasing Chartmetric data to reveal insights about our featured artists. Plans start as low as $10 a month. Learn more and get started today at chartmetric.com. Welcome to And the Writer Is. I'm your host, Ross Golan. This week's virtuoso is not just an accomplished classical pianist. Nope. He's also, in his day job, written and produced multiple evergreens we all know and love. Sure, he began his journey at the ripe age of 3 years old and has since collaborated with divas like Celine Dion, Sarah Brightman, Andrea Bocelli, and Josh Groban, but what many of our listeners know him for is the definitive Miley Cyrus smash and the classic Weekend 6/8 ballad. All the way from Canada, North America, this artiste is committed to being a steward of the songwriting community. And the writer is my friend, Stephan Moccio.
Wow.
What's up, bro?
It's a privilege to get an introduction by you, isn't it? It's I've been waiting for this one for like years.
I mean, we've written together, so I feel like people should know, full disclosure, that I do this every time I see him. I don't even know where to start. I mean, I guess we should start from the beginning, because I feel like I know you well enough that I could jump forward, and we should just kind of give a little bit of the groundwork and the pretend like I don't know you at all. You were born in Canada.
I was born in a town called St. Catharines, just south of Toronto, to a French-Canadian mom and Italian father.
How's your Italian?
I understand it enough to work with Andrea Bocelli.
Oh, there you go. How's your French?
My French is my mother tongue. It's excellent.
Yeah.
C'est Stéphane, je suis français. So I'm French-Canadian, and I went to French school in Ontario.
Got it.
Mom's a piano player. I come from a family of pianists. Started piano lessons at the age of 3 at the conservatory.
When you say family of pianists, how far back are we talking?
We're talking my mom, my aunt, my grandmother, and my brother, who's a music teacher as well.
Who's the best?
I am, of course. No. It's not even the question of that. With all jokes aside, it's a question of, I guess I'm the one who made it my life, and who just devoted, all the good, the bad, the ugly that comes with being, a musician, a songwriter, the risk, the glory, and the pain, actually, a lot of the pain that comes with it, and the sacrifice. So it's my brother's incredible.
Not to jump, but that's probably the most accurate description of what it is to be a songwriter. And a lot of times people are like, whose niece or nephew want to get in the music business, they're like, can they talk to you? I'm like, no, you should listen to this podcast, because this will really give you the right idea of what it is to be a songwriter. When you say the pain of it and the glory of it, what's the ratio of glory to pain in your life?
I think glory 10% if you're lucky, pain 90%, because it's as cliche as it is, passion is the only thing that's going to carry you through this, right? And I don't need to tell you about it either, but the pains and everything from the sacrifice, the time away from your family, and the impact that does on your loved ones. I'm a father as well, and I'm reevaluating what my career over the last 20 years and the decisions I've made, how that has impacted my children, my family, my situation. And then there's other pains that we don't discuss. It's the sort of white elephant in the room. It's the financial pain. It's the amount of risk that you take on yourself. I was a kid from Canada. I took a lot of risk to become a producer, to become a writer, to write that first Celine hit, and demoing the song that it would sound like a Rolls Royce for Celine when I had no money. In reality, my bank account when I was 27 years old when I wrote that. And and then of course the glory is glorious. It makes up for it. It's kind of like pregnancy. You almost forget the pain, right? So that's why you do it over and over again. But if you're lucky enough, like us, to have had whatever, just some of those, as you call them, evergreens, it keeps you going. Mm-hmm. It keeps you going through it. And just because you've had 1 or 2 or 10 or 20, it doesn't mean it becomes more difficult, right? It was David Foster who told me after my first big one, A New Day with Celine, when I wrote that, he says, congratulations, you did it now. You've got like a #1 song globally. And he says, but honestly, the second one's the more difficult one to get. And he was right. Yeah. Second one was, for me, Wrecking Ball. There was 10-year gap in between. But in between all of that, I had a lot going on in Canada, which we can talk about. But writing
you talk about the impact the choice of being a musician has had on your family, your loved ones, and yourself. Is there, I mean, this is a question I would end the thing with normally, right. But like, do you, are there regrets in that?
Not regrets. And nor can you say you would do anything differently, because music is within all of us who choose this métier, this path, right? It's cliche as it is, you say, we didn't choose it, it chose us. Now, would I have done things differently? The amount of time I've devoted to some mega artists and given my life to them, I would certainly reevaluate that. I drove my kids to school every day, but I wasn't there for pickup. And for many, many months, perhaps many years, I wasn't there for bedtime either. Because, you get to the studio by 9 a.m. after you drive the kids to school and you're there till midnight. It's the ratio of trying to get a hit song. And I never got into this business, #1, to write hits. I never got in this business to make money. That was a byproduct of what I did. The initial reason for me getting into music was I was wanting to create art that would give some people some reprieve, some solace, a place to sort of escape to, because that's what music did for me as a kid. When my parents divorced, music was steadfast. It was there. It was the crutch. So I just wrote music to give back to people, for them to feel good, to get lost in, to sort of just lose and wallow their own emotions with the fact that somebody else may be feeling the same way that you are.
Yeah, it's weird. There's how dads view providing for their family, and some view it as providing for their family as time, spent with the family, and some view it as like funding the family, and that, all those. It's really interesting, like the idea of how you view your role in the family, how traditional it should be.
I've got a lot to say on just that alone. I mean, that's a really great point. I mean, we should know, it's our duty, our spiritual duty as writers, that our role as a father, it's both. It's financial and emotional. But if you had to choose one, it would be emotional. I mean, it's what songs are built on, and I know that, and I certainly make every minute, every moment count with my kids now, as they're 18 and 13, and I'm like, where the fuck did it all go? What happened to the time? Yeah. And just yesterday I moved here with a young family, and 6 days into moving here, Wrecking Ball was the biggest song in the world. Yeah. Our furniture hadn't arrived yet from Canada, and then I was doing what we all do, and I was in every writer's room, and I was burning out within 6 months. And I said, this is not who I am. I'm prolific, but I don't like to be prolific on in a speed dating kind of way. And because, as I look back now, I'm old enough, I'm 51. I could look back and go, okay, every big hit song that I've been a part of, it was written when I didn't want to even show up to the writer's room. Yeah. It was just written from a moment of cathartic, just, okay, I'll go in. We want you to meet this guy called Abel Tesfaye. Okay, it was a Friday night. I hadn't had a Friday night with my kids. I said, I'll spend the Friday night with Abel. And the Wrecking Ball was the same thing. I was living in Canada, and I had left on Thursday to come back to Toronto for an Olympic event that I was involved with the music. And my former publisher, Jim Valutato at Sony, says, "Listen, I want to get you in the room with these two people to write a song for Beyonce." And a guy called Sasha Scarbeck and Maureen McDonald. And they wanted me back in that room on Monday. I was like, fuck, man, I got to get back on a plane. I said, I'll do it. Just get back on the plane. That day ends up changing your life. But, you don't plan for these things. I'm not the kind of guy who goes in and says, okay, we're going to write the number one song today. For me, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I just, as they say, just be prepared for it, open to it. And if it's in the air that day, and if the plan is God's plan to make it happen, then it happens. You can only, to kind of go in there. I was listening to you and Noah Khan talk recently, and Noah said something really incredible. He said he didn't want the pressure of writing with those hit writers. Yeah. And that really resonated for me. Because you mentioned as well this writer in particular who was writing at the mercy of a huge artist, and I've worked with clearly some huge artists, and there was one in particular as well who had promised me next single was going to be coming out to the world. There was $1.2 million, there was a $1 million video attached to it, big piece of business that I had spent 4 months on this one song. I was the producer, and I was a co-writer on this track, and then, for personal reasons, this massive artist decided to forego on this single. Yeah. And that's when I said, I can't do it anymore. I can't live in this volatile world. When I got the call, I was cutting strings for Celine Dion in London in 2018 on her last big album, Courage, that I think you were on as well. Yeah. And I said, it's okay. I'm in London, and I had that cathartic moment where BBC Three was playing Vaughan Williams, a classical piece of music. I came back to my room that day after the session, and I started crying. I said, what the fuck am I doing in LA with this big, shiny city? I said, I never got into music to make money. But when you become a father and you live in as expensive city as LA, you have to sort of fund it somehow, right? Because I had a studio, I had staff, I had, ginormous studio in Santa Monica at the time. So I'm going to return back to my roots and do solo piano music. And that was, for me, where everything changed in the best way possible. And I just kind of regained control of my art, regained control of who I was as a person. I didn't feel like I was in service anymore to anybody. Mm-hmm. Listen, there's nothing more exciting than writing an incredible song with writers. And I still do it. But I just don't go in there with the sort of same agenda. I don't put myself in the situation where I'm having to write 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah, it's a weird choice when the writers like the Maxes of the world in pop and Ashley Gorley in country, and who seem to have the ability to they're songwriters. That they're so focused on being songwriters, they have no desire to be artists. They do both have tremendous publishing companies, and they're great mentors to their staff, to their people. Their focus is so admirable to me because it's just not how I work. Like, I want to do that so bad. I want to think that I could go and do 20, 30, 40 years of going into a session, doing the thing. But somewhere in the, okay, now that I've rung the bell a couple times here, let's see if I can write a musical. Let's see what the podcast thing is. Let's see what, like, I'm so interested in exploring the other stuff that some of these writers and producers who are just laser focused on writing smashes for other people, defining their careers over and over again. It's so admirable, and it's so not actually who I am, no matter how much I want to do that. It's just not really me. And I look at, this is your story and not mine, but I see some similarities, and, you've rung the bell a few times, but like your heart is also in, it's not to say you abandon the ability to write for other people or with other people, but your heart is really in something that's the rest of the pop community isn't even looking at. And
Correct.
like the
That's well said,
instrumental,
yeah.
Piano stuff. And it's like you have to kind of keep your head down and be like, who am I really? What serves my soul? Do you feel fulfilled by focusing a good amount of your energy on the classical stuff instead of the writing for others?
God, I I was I was passionate to come and speak with you because I know that my trajectory over the last, say, 2.5 decades is unique. I moved here to LA when I was 40 years old, 39 turning 40, with Wrecking Ball, having had already a hit song. But in between all of that, I had just finished writing the Olympic theme for Vancouver for, the rest of the world probably doesn't know, but in Canada, it's national treasure. It became, the evergreen, the most famous piece of music at that time. And I had spent 2.5 years carving out 257 variations based on a theme and a song for the Winter Games. And I came here with the intention of becoming more or less a film composer because I do a lot of film compositions still for television, and especially back in Canada. I do the hockey theme, I do the baseball theme, the news theme, and all that stuff. Then there's elements that are important to sort of talk about and how that funded. See, people would come to my studio in Santa Monica and say, wow, fuck, he's made it. But they didn't realize that it wasn't just the hit songs that was funding that fancy, shiny building. It was my television music. And, there's a lot of money to be made in film and television. It's almost a dirty little secret with composers. They just don't like to share it and tell people about it because once you've got a theme that airs, I do the baseball theme for the Blue Jays, for example, and that airs 25, 35 times a day. And you don't want your friend taking it from you, but that was funding in a lot of ways the experiment why I was able to write. I want to believe that the sort of songs that I'm involved with are different. You mentioned Earned It. It was a ballad written for, at the time, it's still at the time, one of the biggest artists of all time, for The Weeknd. And somehow we made it work and we made it cool. And that came from a lot of trial and error. I mean, when Abel and I would write together, I mean, the amount of iterations on a song were insane, especially on that first album, Beauty Behind the Madness. Real Life is another big song on that album, and the amount of versions of that song, in many ways, only to come back to the beginning part of it. But I digress. I just I think you just have to follow your heart. That sounds cliche, and what does that mean? It's you kind of know. You have a barometer. Everybody has an instinct and a feeling of when they're doing something that fulfills them or not, and you just become better with time to listening to that voice, and hopefully you have the courage to sort of react accordingly.
Well, let's go back a little bit because I know we jumped ahead. Partly, I knew this was going to happen just because I know you, and I have other questions that are about the contemporary stuff going on. But your family does music. You were about to talk about your brother, but skipping forward, being a 3-year-old who can play piano to being somebody at 27 who has its first notable song,
Right.
Give me what's the journey from 3 years old to that?
Thank you. It's conservatory, classical. I got my degree at University of Western Ontario in performance and composition.
Who's your favorite classical composer? Do you like are you
I'm an impressionist.
You're an impressionist
in many ways, but there's a composer.
So like more Debussy, or
Ravel,
more like
Satie.
Yeah. Shostakovich, maybe that's a little bit after that, right?
I love Ravel as well. It's just the voicings. A lot of Debussy, but voicings end up in my piano playing.
Of course.
I studied a lot of Debussy. John Paul Bracey, my teacher, had studied with Nadia Boulanger, who taught also Quincy Jones and a lot of people.
crazy.
So I had like learned the entire 2 books of preludes by, there's a lot of jazz in Debussy. There's a lot and in Satie, and I found a lot of those voicings ended up in Earned It, for example, with The Weeknd. But my favorite composer, if I had to make there's a composer called Ralph Vaughan Williams, but pronounced Rafe Vaughan Williams. He's English, and he was alive 100 years ago, but he still sounds very modern today. For example, so today's modern living composers, such as say Alexandre Desplat or Thomas Newman, who are composing for film, are highly influenced by Ray Vaughan Williams. And but listen, I had the classical upbringing, very supportive family when it came to music, and I went to school, got the degree, got a scholarship to Berkeley Jazz School in Boston. Declined it because I got signed to Sony at a young age, Sony Music Canada, as a producer immediately. I was like 22 years old, 21, staff producer. And then that 3 to 4 year period in Toronto, I was studying with Jukka-Pekka Sarasti, who's the conductor of the Toronto Symphony. I was like sneaking into the Toronto Symphony rehearsals with my scores of Beethoven and Vaughan Williams. And it was a good education because I ended up becoming a string arranger for a lot of hits when budgets were still a thing back in the day. And meanwhile, this was an important part of my upbringing. I played for almost 3 years in a row at the Four Seasons, the head Four Seasons in Toronto, because that's where the Four Seasons is from Toronto. And during the film festival, I was like the jazz piano player, the lounge guy, and I had to learn the entire American songbook. So that's where I really cut my teeth into learning, Berlin, Gershwin, all the greats, it's and all those great songs, and I would play them, every night for almost 3 years in a row, 6 days a week, between 5 and 8, and then eventually I had cracked my first hit in Canada, and
there's a big jump there. I mean,
okay.
Being somebody who can earn a living from playing live piano in a hotel, and then writing songs on the side, even if you had that production deal or whatever you had with Sony Canada, what were you at night after the performing? You were going to sessions?
Correct.
Who was booking your sessions?
Lived and breathed it. So Sony was booking my sessions. I was signed, they recognized the talent at an early age. They just said, dude's got talent. We believe in them. And that was the time where they were just kind of giving, little publishing deals, a handshake and $15,000 or $20,000 cash. And I would be spending it on my gear. Let's say it would be going right to gear. There's a lot of, again, there's these details that were so pivotal. I had written a very important show theme, a talk show theme back in the late 90s for Camilla Scott on our CTV, which is our sort of privatized network like NBC. And again, I'm in my early 20s, Ross. It's and that combined with gigging at nighttime and then eventually having a handful of #1 Canadian hits, which don't generate a lot of money, but was giving me enough money to sort of quit the Four Seasons, even though it was a really cool thing, and then fully immerse and soak myself like from 9 to midnight every night in the studio and produce records at Sony at their studio there.
The 90s and 2000s produce some of the world's best. The 90s, 2000s, Canada produces probably the two top diva, male and female, with like Josh and Celine
and
Alanis,
Sarah
McLachlan, later Bieber, Weeknd. Obviously there's a list of producers too, but the list just seems to be, most recently like the Shawn Mendes's of the world, but like Canada seems to produce such iconic artists. And I asked this question to other Canadians who've been on this podcast, where it's the size of Canada population wise is about the size of California.
Correct.
The impact Canadian artists at the top seem to have on the world is so disproportionate to the population. How much of that is cultural? How much of that is government? How much of that is
Geographics. And geographics as well. When I say geographics, we're looking down our friendly neighbor down south, the U.S. and the almighty U.S. My theory, and I think I've heard even Michael say this on your show at some point, something to the effect that Canadians aren't harder working per se, but our work ethic, in order to become great and to become excellent, I believe that we have to work just harder at it. I can use examples in just moving here, the immigration alone, just the paperwork, moving a family, moving my publishing company from Canada to a US corp, and the amount of energy, the finances that takes. So when you are having to make those laser sharp decisions, you know exactly what you're after, the bullseye. So Bieber, Bublé, you named them all. Myself, you got Drake, you got Abel. We know what we want, and we know that America can help us. So we come here, and we mean business.
When you get your, you having a TV theme and paying your bills, by doing still versions. I don't know what the themes sound like.
Right.
Full disclosure.
That's okay.
But the still in the world of piano music, coming from a family that plays piano. I had a meeting yesterday with somebody who was conflating integrity and pop music. They feel like pop means that you don't have integrity in a weird sort of way, and it's
that's not true.
And I think my music theory teacher and my music history teacher, when I was studying classical in college, those people really looked down on pop music. They really didn't think of the integrity of pop composition. Shifting to something like Celine is a good gray area between
right.
Classical and pop. But did your family approve of the music choices?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, but
did you approve of your own music choices along the way, or did you feel like you were selling out?
A few times I think I was selling out.
Okay.
The early days. Okay. Yeah. I talk about the themes. I talk about the importance of how, if I didn't have those, I couldn't buy the equipment that would allow me to become a producer. Do you know what I'm saying? It's so, are those themes going to go down in history? Probably not. But I have probably 4 or 5 of them that will, with Canadian culture, and they'll remember them forever. The hockey theme as well being one of them. But the constant battle between, and the shunning of pop music not being as important as classical music is complete, utter bullshit, because, I live in both worlds. I grew up as a classical musician first. And if you take a well constructed production and pop song, if it's done well, let's just use Max Martin, for example, who builds incredible cars when it comes to this. There's should be as much respect paid to the compositional, the architecture, the engineering of that track as a piece of classical music. And then this opens up a whole can of worms that we don't have time to get into today. But what makes a great piece of classical music as well? We don't know, and we won't know probably for 100 years after I die, after we all die, if it's sustainable, if it worked, because only the great ones last. And there's a reason why they do. It's because they're beautifully built, and they're beautiful. They're beautifully built melodically, harmonically, just everything kind of works. I, can only speak from my experience and why I sort of took a sabbatical, if you will. I was just being a classical musician. I also love being off the grid, off the click. And, doing solo piano music is just me in a room by myself, just having a conversation with my piano. Therefore, it almost becomes this very visceral, cathartic conversation and therapy session between myself and the piano. And in many ways, that helps heal me with my own pain, whatever. We all have.
You were saying your parents got divorced. Is that the root of your childhood pain?
I would say so. It's not like, it's not like I've had tragedy happen. It's just that, I think like a lot of us songwriters were empaths, we're very emotional people, and it really kind of like rattled me at that time.
How old were
13,
you?
14, 15.
Is that when you is that what sparked the therapy sessions with your piano?
Yes. I mean, I was already improvising and playing long hours at the time. I would say, if anything, too, I would put the headphones on and air drum to the couch, to everything from Ozzy Osbourne to Judas Priest to the Cars to the big pop acts of the '80s. But I think when by osmosis, a lot of my lessons as a producer were learned as well by listening very carefully to what was going on. I mean, Mutt Lange was just starting at that time, and what was going on with those pop records and how they were built, because I was listening to it under the microscope of those headphones, losing myself from perhaps just not wanting to just deal with the sadness.
Yeah. I mean, Mutt Lange and our Shania are.
It's a great interview, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
It's
what a legend. You have this what looks like a lull in a discography, and when I remember I was talking to Allie Willis, about former guest, and the late Allie Willis, about hits, and she was like, just don't ever ask people about their hits, ask about the time between their hits. It's like the hit comes out and everyone's like, wow, you're killing it. You're like, no, you don't understand. It was the 5 years I was writing when no one was looking, that I wrote this song, this music, this, this album, this, TV theme, this, whatever you were writing, all happens when nobody's looking,
It's well said.
But you end up with, a huge song with the Celine Dion theme when you're 27. You've been with Sony at that point for 5 years. You don't move to Universal for another 10 years about.
Correct.
What happens in the 9 years or whatever it was, 7 years from the Celine song to like, I'm going to sign a worldwide publishing deal. What are you doing with your time? What was your personal life like? What are you doing?
Great question. So I've got on a work, that's when I wrote the Olympic theme. That was a big part of my life, big chapter. Perhaps still my proudest iconic moment of music, bigger than the other songs, if you will. And I was, I was making money. I was now finally able to sort of travel the world. I had been working and busting my ass off up until that point, for 10 years to get that first hit. I became a father for the first time in 2005 after Celine, and I decided to, back then with Universal Music Canada, everyone was asking me what's a good chill record. Spotify really wasn't a thing yet, and streaming, but they were just wanting music to chill to and cook to. And I said, I can't really think of one other than like Bill Evans, but I love Bill Evans. I love Oscar Peterson, but it's just sometimes a little too complex for the average person. So I'm going to do one. I'm going to do the record that I want to do. So I had the time, I had the resources, I had the studio and the piano, and I did one in Toronto, and it blew up. It blew up. It became the biggest instrumental album, and I started touring the country, and I was on the pop charts with a classical or contemporary classical record up there. Ahead of, at that time, Drake and Bieber back in the day on iTunes. When every time there was a need for this kind of music, so I did 2 of those albums, which did so well, and they just kind of filled me up on a creative level, an artistic level. And then the grass is always greener, right? So when you're doing one thing, you want to do the other thing. It's often the case as just creatives in general. I said I wanted to kind of get back into writing, and I knew that if I wanted to go big, I had to. Got to be careful in how I say this, because some of my favorite publishers in the world are still my Canadian publishers. But I knew that they couldn't do anything because they were still governed by the head office here in the US. So I had to get out of my Canadian deal, or let it run through and not renew, and then sign with, Evan Lamberg eventually, and at UMPG.
Love Evan.
We all love Evan.
Yeah, shout out Evan.
We all love Evan. And it was just, it was a real tough decision for me because I become really close with the people I work with. And, Dave Kulico, who's a dear friend, who runs the Canadian office back there at Sony Publishing, he gave me my first breaks. He was the first guy who believed in me and just put it all in the line. But there's oftentimes an alignment that you have to have. Sometimes it's like having a good manager as well who has the connections, who can put you in those rooms, those necessary rooms that will just get you a little closer to having success.
Man, I'm sure, and from a Canadian, that I guarantee that that's true. But most of the relationships I've had that have turned into commercial success, or 50% of them at least, nobody in the room when we first started writing had the commercial success. Like, we all
Correct.
made that room
Yeah.
what it was. And I think a lot of times there's this idea that, man, if I was in those rooms, I would write hits. And the reality is, in LA currently at this time, there's probably about 100 rooms of people that have no hits that are just Ferraris.
100%.
That
100%.
could totally write a smash today, and they're itching to do it, and they're sitting there being, man, if I was in that room with Max Martin, you're like, no, you don't understand. Like, that's that room. Your room is also powerful. And,
I believe exactly what you're saying, that those rooms are more times than not more powerful, the hungry ones, the early ones. And I mean, listen, I'll bring it back to Sasha and Mo and I. I mean, Sasha and I had already a hit. Sasha had co-written Beautiful with James Blunt as well. And Mo was just so cool. Just a cool artist. But we didn't try, even though we were put in the room to write for Beyonce that day, we forgot about that within the first 2 seconds. It's just let's write a song. And what I do, though,
imagine that song. It's funny because you tell a lot of times when people don't know what to write for, I usually say, just write for Rihanna. She's not going to cut the song anyway. So aim for it, and at least your cool factor will be up a level, because you're like, well, I can't, So there's something in the aiming for Beyonce that creates Wrecking Ball, when it's like, I'm sure that Beyonce never heard it. She would have fucking
She probably never did. We know she would have.
Even if you forget about it in the room, going in there, at least opening the door, being like, this room today, we're gonna write a Beyonce hit. Will at least you know that the competition are the best songwriters in the world. So you aim for something better than, I don't know, what should we write today? It's just sort of like us against ourselves.
Okay, so I get that, and there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. But I'll go back to Wrecking Ball within the first 5 minutes, and I know that Mo's been on the show as well. And I don't know exactly how she described her story, but let me at least give you the version that, I was late to the session by about 5-10 minutes. Sasha and her had already started fiddling around with some stuff. But Mo, and forgive me, I think I'm allowed to say this, she was supposed to get married that week, right? And so she was emotionally there and frail, but she called off her wedding with all the courage because she just knew it wasn't the right thing to do. And you quickly had to put everything aside and kind of be there for this person that you don't even know, who was just kind of grieving this massive thing. So in many ways, it gifted us with that frailty, that fragility, that thing that became Wrecking Ball.
It's also what makes Mozella so great is that I think she comes in with her heart on her sleeve anyway.
She does.
And she knows how to tap into something that she's willing to be vulnerable, and she's willing to bring a room into something deeper than, that she's like that in real life. She's not a very surface person. So it's
no.
And that's what's so great, to be able to be in a room with somebody who's opens up,
within
like
within 5 minutes we're right to it. We feel like we've known each other forever, and that is Mo, and that's certainly one of her many gifts. But she knows how to get in there and get to the heart of it immediately.
Obviously the success of that song is massive, and and we've talked about it before, but Earned It's interesting because having been involved in film composition and television, it becomes essentially one of the themes of 50 Shades of Grey. And there aren't that many soundtracks, that produce multiple hits.
Right.
In the last few years, maybe there's Barbies and there's, the obviously like the Fast and Furious franchise always
Yeah.
has a bunch of hits. But to be part of a soundtrack, to me, sometimes when those things happen, I feel like, oh man, this is sort of the death of this song. Like, I hope it happens, but
Of
like
course.
a lot of big promises with soundtracks, but it's so rare for people to follow through. And 50 Shades of Grey just ends up being the soundtrack to be on with the artist to be with,
It was, and I had 2 songs on that album, which was
What was the other one?
Skylar Grey, I Know You.
That I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
So,
right.
I mean, the wild story with that, I don't know, maybe it's worth saying, but just quickly, Wrecking Ball had happened, and still within that same year, Skylar and I wrote this great song. Mike Knobloch, who all know from Universal Pictures, falls in love with it, and he champions that. It was the end credits song. So I got to know Sam Taylor Johnson throughout the process, and more importantly, Dana Sano, the music supervisor. She was a huge element in the success of that soundtrack. She just knows music. She has great taste. And then they changed the scene of 50 Shades, and I remember getting the call to write. Sam says, "Can you come here?" I just moved to LA, and I want to show you, but we want an R&B song. And we need to be sung from a male perspective. Luckily, I had just gotten in the room with Abel, and I had, we had the germ. We hadn't really earned it, but we had this da 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 da, and they basically just said, just go finish that song, write it, watch the movie, write the picture, and the rest is history. And I ended up getting the 2 end credit songs in that movie, which was just
cool.
Surreal for me, and it was an exciting time because we got the nomination for the Academy Award, and everybody wanted to be on that soundtrack. But again, I need to reiterate, it was just an accident in how it happened. It wasn't like I was like, I got to be on.
You want to?
It wasn't planned. I wanted to write with Skylar. I'm a huge fan with Skylar, and we wrote this song, and it just so happened that Mike loved it, and it was great. And then with Abel, it just, the timing, as we say, was all there. And Abel also ended up having 2 songs on that soundtrack. The Weeknd and had 2, and Stephan Moccio had 2.
Chartmetric is proud to sponsor the upcoming season of And the Writer Is. As the go-to source for up-to-date global social, streaming, and audience data for artists and music industry professionals, Chartmetric strives to ensure everyone can have a successful career in music. Their easy-to-understand and powerful analytics on over 10 million artists and 100 million tracks will help answer all of your questions, from tracking your stats to discovering new talents. Throughout this season, we'll be showcasing Chartmetric data to reveal insights about our featured artists. Plans start as low as $10 a month. Learn more and get started today at chartmetric.com. Not to be cryptic about other people on this podcast again, but I was talking to one recently who was saying that, they release they end up on 5 songs in a year, 3 to 5 songs in a year. And this person's catalog sold for $1 gajillion because in those 3 to 5 songs are just amazing songs. It's not to say that they don't write a lot, but those are, he was talking about, there are these writers who seem to do full albums, which I always think is, which sounds amazing. They just keep doing these full albums with these artists, and in that are hits,
Right.
And then,
right.
In that are also 8 album tracks here, 8 album tracks there. But they seem to be really prolific in writing and releasing a shitload of songs. And then there's some that have in their discography, they have the evergreens, but they don't have the Obviously you have a lot of songs released with you as an artist, but when it comes to some of these outside songs, it's like there's a missile. It's like your job is to locate the single that needs to be there and execute that. Do you envy the people who do more of the albums, or are you happy that you're not in that you're not spending uh you know 3-4 months with this artist, 3-4 months with that artist, 3-4 months with that artist, instead you're focused on this song at a time?
Yeah.
And maybe we can't all curate our discography, so let's like,
We know we can't fully, but we
Yeah.
can kind of set some boundaries and some goalposts that help at least us get closer to where we want to be. And just that requires, again, some really big decisions and in career choices and stuff like that. Now, I used to envy, Justin Tranter's a great friend of ours, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, I wanted always to be the guy who just would write 5 days a week and show up, and his job would be done at the end of the night. But because the producer's always left with the pieces and putting the puzzle together. So for example, if you get together with say Justin's talented, fast, great, and quick, and then 9 times out of 10, my demos end up becoming the record anyhow. So whether I end up becoming the quote unquote producer or I end up becoming the real producer, the label will end up purchasing the tracks for me. But I had to put in the time, and sometimes it's fast. Sometimes the tracks just end up getting done in 3 to 5 days. There's many times though where I end up spending north of a month or 2 months on it, and just kind of pleasing everybody. And a lot of times, as we discussed before, those can get dumped as fast as they can, with
we've worked the one project we
Oh my
worked on.
gosh.
I remember you spending so much time on the masters for that.
And I love that song.
And yeah, but I just remember feeling like this guy's dedication is unmatched, and how far you were
Right.
going for these records for a talented and at the time up and coming artist, but it wasn't working with The Weeknd. It wasn't
Exactly.
like there was no guarantee, and it's hard to spend that much time on an artist that has no track record.
I think that's when I said I had to draw the line for myself at that point. I had gone through a couple of those artists where I really believed in them, and I still believe to this day they are as talented, as gifted, and as worthy of being out there. But sometimes it's a plethora of things. Like I said, it could be the attitude, it could be that the artist doesn't have enough grit and not stamina, or it's not even that. Maybe the artist has it all going on, but just literally the timing of everything and having every break happen. But when you're the producer and you're the one at the mercy, and age plays a factor too, right, Ross? Like you're a father now as well. I was really in the prime of being a father to young children, and just kind of questioning and saying, what part of this is worth it and what part of this isn't worth it?
My question is like, why are you / we so stupid as to being like,
I think that's well said.
I want to see what else is out there. And of all things, something that isn't quote like cool. It's not like
Right.
all the kids that are listening to Miley and to The Weeknd. Why are you doing this?
I'm a fucking dinosaur, right? It's just like, even though I'm a young person at heart, remember the career. I have to remind you, I had a successful career as an instrumentalist in Canada, but what does that mean? It meant I got to tour and pack some really cool venues and stuff like that. And
what size venues do you play?
1,000-ish.
In Canada?
In Canada, but like now, like I'm off to, like I said, Australia and Germany and France soon enough, and back to Canada. No more. It's always in between 800 to 1,500 roughly right now.
And when you play in Australia, are you playing multiple cities in Australia, or is it
Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane?
And then when you're in Germany, you're playing
4 or 5 cities as well.
And when you're in Germany, do you go outside of Germany? Do you go to France? Do you go to
I got France January. Yeah, Switzerland I want to do. It's not scheduled yet, but we've got France in January and February. I don't know.
And who's we?
Well, I mean myself, my management. I mean, okay, let's get back to the conversation about. Okay, so I poured my heart for almost a decade here in LA, right? I had that great run. And maybe if I was hypercritical of why I left and what maybe didn't work for me in the pop thing, and I take my time when it comes to production. And maybe I'm too slow. I'm a big producer in terms of so there's a lot of neurons going up there and well thought out parts and stuff like that. But Earned It, though, ironically, was by virtue of time we had to lock the picture, was produced, mixed in less than 6 days. And sometimes that helps for a guy like me, in terms of paralysis analysis type of thing. Yeah. It's just
they're setting the boundaries that force you to
exactly just trusting my gut, and you don't have times for second, third, takes and decision process. You just kind of go on your first ethereal, and that helps someone like me. But that's ironically how my piano music is. So, but now it's become the fourth biggest genre in the world. We've got hip hop, pop, country, and solo piano. And you've got guys like Ludovico Einaudi, Max Richter, who are streaming insane numbers.
Max Richter's
Max, we love Max. And I'm taking, this is 2016, and you got to remember, I'm signed to Universal Music Publishing, and I happen to know the world of Decca in the UK, and David Joseph, who runs the office there in the UK. And David had approached me in 2016. He says, "Listen, man," he says, "whenever you're ready," because I'm such a fan of your piano music. He goes, "We've got guys like Max Richter and Einaudi who are 10, 15 years older than you, and they're like rock stars in this lane. And this genre is just starting to break with the playlists that are chill, study playlists that are just, and all of a sudden it's quietly becoming a cool thing, this genre of music, with the young kids, the people who are in colleges and universities who are needing this introspective kind of music to study to. And when I took the leap, it was really stark, Ross. It was 2018. Like I said, I was in that hotel room. I came back that Christmas, purchased and got a really beautiful custom built Yamaha felted piano. Because that's the thing, the quiet sound on the felt. I had Yamaha built me one. We built up a specific piece of custom felt to get mine to sound really soft. And I said to my engineer, Jay, and Kylan, both guys, I said, guys, we're turning it around right now. I said, I'm taking solo piano. I just finished Celine's album. I said, I've got a minute here. I don't have anything on my plate that I had kind of finished everything, my responsibilities in the pop world. So let's give this a shot. And so I created this first album, Tales of Solace, where I just locked myself in the room for 5-6 weeks, recorded 30 hours of music, edited down to 53 minutes worth. And I signed the deal with David Joseph in the UK, which is part of the UMG family. It's a universal thing. So I signed a global deal, a classical deal, and my label mates happen to be Max Richter and Einaudi, the two other bigger guys in this category. And we dropped my album, and I purposely decide not to put my face on it. They're like, "Put your face on." I'm like, no. I said, I don't want it to be about the looks. I don't want this to be popified. It's not about that. It's got to be about the music, and this music has to be how it's interpreted for people. So it's a picture of an album of a piano in a quarantine room. And this is February 2020. My album comes out. My first single, Fracture, comes out literally in March. The world, wow. This pandemic shuts down. Everyone thinks it's the pandemic album. So, but I don't know if you would agree, but I would agree that's also when all this sort of younger generation, the Lizzie McAlpines, the Gracie Abrams, the singer-songwriters started to evolve through COVID, and my piano music was the thing, because I recorded a huge amount of music during those 18 months of shutdown, of the world shut down. I did a Christmas album, holiday album. I did another album, Lionheart, and my streaming numbers for piano music were now over 1 billion, right? So it's collectively on all platforms, and something was working. People wanted this music. And then I think, my daughter who's now 18, but she, going to school in LA, it was interesting to see, because a lot of her friends were using my music to study to, and not knowing that, that Stephan Moccio was Al's dad. and my daughter, who's just like, oh no, here we go. And that's when I said, if we're able to kind of connect with the 18, 19-year-olds as well on that level, then we're doing something well. I mean, listen, I'm not trying to change the world other than just kind of write music that makes me feel good. And I happen to have the pop thing in the back of my head when I'm writing a 3.5 minute piece of music. That's important still to make,
Totally.
to land on these playlists, to land on these top spots of the playlist. You can indulge yourself and write a 12-minute piece of solo piano music, and could be the coolest thing in the world, but it's not going to be heard if it's not playlisted properly.
It's just so crazy because, when we talk a lot to new artists, so much of it's about social media numbers, so much of it is about a lot of things other than the quality of the music and the strategy around finding holes in the music business that aren't being exploited. And you end up with, multiple songs in the tens of millions, over 100 million streams on Fracture as a 100% writer,
Right.
100%
Well said.
producer.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what your deal is with Decca, but like, the deal I have with Interscope and Decca on my sort of avant-garde-ish kind of thing is something that's advantageous for an artist per se. And it's like you start looking at these numbers and the money ball aspect of doing this kind of thing. The Moneyball being, the Michael Lewis, the author who wrote the book that became the movie about all the analytics around baseball and how you can, with a tenth of the payroll of the Yankees, if you're smart, you can compete with them because you're looking where they're not.
Correct.
And
Correct.
in this case, it's, you can, if you had 100 million stream song that you had a quarter of on the publishing and you produced it and you had your 4 points or whatever you get, you'd be stoked with that in real life. And then but when it's your music and it's this kind of thing, there's almost no going back once you hit those kinds of numbers, because there's no reason. The amount of money you make from that, let alone the touring and all the other things that go along. So we started, before we started recording this, there's a little bit of be careful what you wish for, because all of a sudden now you're like, how do you turn that down? Because
are you talking with your podcast?
Yeah. I'm just saying, just there's no way to turn it down.
There's no way, but your podcast is that in many ways too. I don't know if you ever thought it would become this, this important thing that you and Joe are making for the songwriting community. Same thing for me. And the stats element, I guess, is a very important one to draw the attention to, because like you said, Fracture on just Spotify, that's not Apple. That's just Spotify. It's 100 million. That's like having a 500 million stream of a quarter of a song. Yeah. And I have a few of those now. But again, I never, ever did this for that. It's just, but luckily, we've got to rewind a second. So I take a break. I'm still making significant money from the royalties and the income streams from the hits that I've written. And you got to remember, I'm still writing the hockey theme and the baseball theme and the news theme in Canada. That's generating ridiculous money just by getting out of bed in the day. So I'm able to do this very simple overhead album called Tales of Solace. I don't have to take big advances from the label because I've got cash. It doesn't take that much money to do it, and I've got, more importantly, I've got the high-tech studio in Santa Monica. Most people are doing this in their house with two microphones. I've got sometimes 16 microphones just to make sure we've got the atmos and the surround the like sound going on all of this. And my album, I want to believe, comes out sounding different than your average piano album because of that. Because I'm a classical musician, but I'm also producing my piano album. I'm not being produced by somebody else. I know how to cut and edit. I can. A lot of my pieces are sometimes just one take, but there's a lot of them that are 40, 50, 60 takes cut together. Fracture was, if I remember, was like 70 takes, and I probably 3 performances put together. But there's a piece called Sea Change on my first album too, which was at the number 1 spot on Peaceful Piano for like 6 months. And I think Sea Change is like 40, 40 million roughly on Spotify alone. And that was a song that I just went in one night for that album, and I didn't write. I just improvised for 2 minutes and 52 seconds, and it was what it was. And it became this thing. And all of a sudden, Bruce Springsteen is using it for this campaign, when Biden was coming into, and it's being used on all these sort of like these underneath these speeches. But again, you never know where your music's going to end up. If you just do good work, it ends up someplace and ends up moving someone somewhere. And it just does. But like you said, I have no desire to go back now. But I want to evolve it. What does that mean? Of course. And evolve it means like...
Well, this is sort of your label mate, the Max Richter thing is like, there's one thing where it's instrumental, then there's some more experimental stuff that he does, that's not as, that's not as normal as like just...
Of course.
This, so it's like, and with your skill set as a producer, there's obviously like infinite possibilities, and now that you have a fan base, you kind of can take them on a journey,
Correct.
Do you spend... how much of your time do you devote to social media?
It's a love-hate relationship, and it's always been a big one for me because at one point I had a team that helped, and then it just came off as inauthentic. I'm back in, strangely just had a meeting with Meta yesterday about this, and we can't ignore it even if we want to. So I have to figure a way, and I have an idea, but you have to figure a way for me to feel like I've got something to say that's just worth saying. That's all. Nothing I hate more than seeing somebody who's trying to be cool on social media, right? And I don't want to be that guy. If I feel I've got something of relevance, it's gonna help somebody, then I'll say it, or educate somebody on the process of songwriting. It's like you're doing what you're doing with the show. You're enlightening. You're bringing a microscope to this world, and some people are going, wow, it's not as glamorous, but it's exactly what I was hoping for. I'm just moved, and I just want to show that. And I'm trying to find ways to, Universal had a good idea. They put me on this 1824 tour recently, where I went and I played and I talked to these Ivy League schools this past year. I was at Harvard, I was at Northwestern as well, and talking to the music students, and just about, because my music's being used to study too, so the kids know my music. And so talking about the music industry, talking about the process of how I write this stuff, why I write it at a certain tempo, the pedagogy and the separation of the cortex, and why I think this music is really good to study too, and why it makes you relaxed and have the ability to absorb information. Like, I'm doing these albums because I love to entertain. If I'm hosting a dinner, or I'm just chilling and reading a book because I'm a voracious reader, I want these albums to help me get into that zone.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm just trying to create them. And like you said, it created a bit of a monster in the process, in a good way.
All right, well, let's go to the next thing. 5 for 5. I'm going to list 5 things, and I'm just curious what the first thoughts are that you have. Let's start with counterpoint.
It's so vital. I mean, we don't even talk about the influence of classical music, and counterpoint is injected into great pop songs. But Max does it well. I know that it is one of the most significant ingredients in my pop records is my piano voicings, and making sure that those suspensions are used. A lot of people sometimes will try to use the same shade of blue that I do in that chord, and they don't figure out sometimes there's a little saucy element that just suspends on a chord. So
yeah, it's the that same conversation I had yesterday. I was trying to explain to this person that, and I use this analogy a lot, but magicians know how illusionists work,
right.
And they can still admire it when they're like, how is that done? But they can kind of figure it out, but they can't quite totally figure it out.
Correct.
And the layman in general is just like, holy shit, this is all amazing. Like, they don't understand that they're being, that there's an audio magic to what we do. And the magic in what composers, the real magic comes to me in counterpoint and resolution and in suspension, like that, because that's when your expectations can be messed with most by voicings and by melody over chords, and the way you mess with melodies, and the way you the way you recapture refrains and find different places on different chords for that refrain to be. It's like it's all counterpoint to me.
It's all counter. I mean, I love that you've brought that up. Wrecking Ball, it's one of the songs that's been covered the most, and there's the third chord in the bridge that nobody's gotten right yet, the B flat, in that sort of like in that lower voicing. And I always hear it, and I always like interested in seeing what surprise are they going to give me? But there's a specific note that I flatten in the third chord, and I'm big on it. I get it. You can take 1-6-4-5 progression, just a very basic, just your all around pop progression, but you can put in that one chord, you could put a ninth in it, you could put on the sixth chord, you could put we know this, but the thing is, I think it's vital, especially with producers who have a specific scent, like a cologne that you just know it's them, and they have a way of voicing. So counterpoint for me, Paramount.
Toronto.
It's home. It's mixed feelings because I miss it, and I felt forced to leave out of there because just commerce wasn't big enough. I couldn't support it there, but in a beautiful city.
Piano. My
life, my muse, my confidant.
Your children. Entire
inspiration. Raison d'etre now. It's changed everything for me as a human. The moment my daughter was born in 2005, that was the first time I did a piano album. They allow me to be as a parent, you have to be accountable for something. So if you've got a lot of bullshit in your life, your kids will put you in an honest place.
Pop music.
Love it. Really do. I love it when it's well built. I love it when it's well architectured and engineered. And I hate it as well. And I hate the game of it. But I said, above all, again, I grew up listening to American radio. And
what do you hate the game of the music industry, or do you hate the music of pop?
I
hate the pop music industry.
I hate the hypocrisy of it. What does that mean?
Well, I just wonder, when it's like, do you love and hate the classical music?
Sure, for same reasons as well. Like you can say, because there is a staunchiness with classical music as well, and what comes with that world, and that I loathe. So but if you were able to identify the elements of things that you like, then you know exactly what you're after.
One of the things that we talked about discussing, before we close out, is the practice that DSPs and certain DSPs actually fund fake artists to fill specifically instrumental music. But we're all being told, I was talking to Mike Karen, also a guest of this podcast. I feel like we're referencing a lot of these people, who was just saying that, the hard thing about this generation for songwriters is that everyone is being encouraged to be an artist too. So the devotion just to composition is becoming smaller and smaller because everyone is also being encouraged to be an artist. So you end up with all these sort of, side projects and side projects and side projects.
Of course, all across. And hyphenated.
And when you look at specifically the instrumental world, it's filled with not real projects and not real artists, more so than ones that have voices. Let's talk a little bit about that practice before we close out, because it specifically affects an artist like yourself.
Luckily, I've been put in the I guess the elite group, if you will, with the Einaudi's, with the Max Richters, the Olafur Arnolds, and then of course, and I want to be very clear because there are some DSPs more than others. Well, actually, there is a DSP that maybe does this practice. It's common. It's known now. It's the cat is out of the bag. But I want to discuss the fact that if your song is not a certain length on specific for specific playlists, you won't get, so it affects the compositional element of it, right?
Mhm.
James Blake came out recently, and I concur with him completely on talking about how TikTok now, we just listened to 20 seconds of a song, and that's affecting the arch of a song, the arrangement of a song.
Sure.
We only know the 20 seconds, and then the people are sitting there dumbified at a concert because they can't sing the rest of the song because we've only driven that 20 seconds of virality. And the same thing with instrumental music. For example, if your piece is, say, incredible melody, an incredibly built piece of music compositionally, but if it's over 4.5, 5 minutes long, it won't get necessarily the top echelons of the coveted playlist. So then the strategy, and then all of a sudden you got to figure out the fastest way to give all your information. Sometimes brevity is the way to be. I completely agree. I don't like anything that lingers on unnecessarily longer than it should be. However, sometimes, like any great conversation, the best part comes 6, 7 minutes into the conversation. And we're missing those moments now in music. And I think it's the get to the chorus, don't bore us, right? I get it. I want to get to the chorus fast in a pop song as well.
I mean, it's still Schubert. One of the things that I say a lot to people is like, the idea of starting with the chorus is every Beethoven song, it's every Gershwin. It's jazz. It's you start with the hook. You start with da 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 da. You don't start with the other shit.
No,
When we were growing up, it was really a in vogue thing to have, like Phil Collins in the air tonight or whatever.
Right,
It's like,
of course.
you end up you're 6 minutes before you get to a chorus or something like that. Like you don't have that. You also don't have November Rains, and you won't have Bohemian Rhapsody. It's not that people can't release those songs. You have versions of that.
You can.
But the idea of starting with the hook and having a 2.5 minute song is really like, I mean, What a Wonderful World is, probably 2 minutes and 15 seconds tops.
That's why I said, sometimes it's the best thing.
Like we're just in a song world right now. I think the weird thing is that you need to have, even as a classical instrumentalist, you still need to have some of your songs fit this pop length to make those playlists be, and then the longer pieces are just ones that exist on your album for yourself and for your fans.
I always say that some of my best work is sometimes the less known work, right?
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, I know the tricks. Even in a piece of instrumental music, you want to get to the feeling ASAP, right within the first 2 seconds. Like the tempo, I talked about that earlier. Being off grid, if you get the tempo right, is a beautiful thing. It's just very humanistic. I equate it to like a conversation. We don't talk like robots, always on the beat like that. If we had our conversations, but we ebb, we flow, we pull back, we slow down, we speed up, and that's what makes us human. That's what makes it real. And I think that's the beauty of the instrumental music, at least with the artists that I've mentioned. And there's many more as well, but the fake artists is an entire podcast on its own.
Yeah, I know. It's like I want to go further into it, but the reality is, and the real brief synopsis is that if you started looking up who these artists are on instrumental playlists, specifically in jazz and classical, you'll find that whatever it would be, 7 out of 10 artists in some of these playlists don't exist.
Just all you have to do is go see if they have a photo of themselves and if they have a website.
There's
and
no
just Google
website. There's no photo,
Instagram.
There's no Instagram. There's nothing.
It's
somebody's paying for these people to exist. Like who the record labels are. It's definitely a part of the music industry that is clearly being exploited and not being talked about. And I don't know. I don't even know who's the ethics around it. I mean,
ethics. I mean, that's
ethics in DSPs is sort of, kind of an oxymoron anyway, but it's specifically in this case, it's pretty tough to watch DSPs allow that, and yet they'll take down artificial intelligent music because there's no copyright owner for that. But in this case, there is a copyright owner. I think we're just wondering who those copyright owners are and who these real artists really are, and
how they're being funded.
And they're not, the quality isn't as good. It's all these things, but it's like on a playlist that they don't care, because like then the payout goes potentially to themselves or it goes somewhere. Yeah, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist kind of person, so like I may be total. I would love to be shown that how wrong this is, and but the general assumption is that this is prevalent.
No, there's a lot of pianists, for example, on Instagram who have for the piano world, for the solo piano world, have 500,000 to 1 million, sometimes 2 million followers. Let's say. I know that's not sort of Taylor Swift numbers. But we're talking about a whole different genre here. But so if you've got like north of 1 million followers on Instagram, and yet they don't have the monthly listenership that say someone like myself has, 2 million followers or our monthly listeners, and they're hyper aware of what you're discussing right now. I'm always delicate in how I tread these waters because I have a lot to say about it. There is one particular DSP that does things nobly, that does things extremely well, and they don't discriminate whether a song is longer or not. And I really believe that they discriminate whether the piece of music deserves to be heard or not. That's what it should come down to. Yeah. And then the question of ethics is who can decide that, right? But yeah, there's a lot to be said there. I know that you're passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. And I'm determined to sort of like to advocate for this cause over time, because it's not doing anything good for the genre.
Well, I appreciate you for being on this podcast. I know it's a long time coming. We've been talking about it for years.
No, I appreciate it.
It's fun to have you on. You and I will, it's nice to find other people who have taken the road less traveled in this business, because
I know you have.
I think we're all trying to figure out what we're actually doing and what if the point of this podcast is to talk about the life of songwriters, I think the definition of a songwriter continues to evolve, and those who are willing to explore the business and be vulnerable and try new things, and then to succeed at it is inspiring. And I'm proud of all the success that you've had as an artist. Sure, of course, I'm proud of what I'm impressed with what you've done as a producer and as a writer, but what you've done as an artist is truly exciting. And
thank you.
I wish that all of your albums have this kind of
momentum. There's a thing. It's just a few years ago when one of my albums came out, and you hit me up. I kind of knew this invisible thing between us, because sometimes taking the road less traveled is the more exciting one. I know you get that, but I also want to say thank you. I mean, I've leaned on this podcast now for the two of you for a few years. I would I work out to it all the time, because it's just interesting. You have quality people, and it's important to shed light and expose things as well, where things need to be exposed. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
You got it, man. There you go.